the cynicism and corrosiveness which is, by the way, I mean, there's a rational reason for being cynical. It's not made up. So the sentiment is not the problem. It's the lack of delivery and then the sentiment that's the problem. But that really erodes democracy. I mean, that Chinese strategists are constantly saying democracy doesn't work, and they're pointing to things like this. But I will say the withdrawal itself was amazing, right? That Biden just said, we're going to withdraw, and we did. And that is an incredible success story. But, I think like characteristically that whole consulting class, and I include most of the media in this at this point, they looked at the withdrawal and they said, oh, what a catastrophe. Not because like it was particularly violent relative to almost any other withdrawal from Afghanistan or any other end of any other war. It was actually way less violent than most ends of wars. But because they are embarrassed about it. And so they have to turn what is a remarkable success, a painful one, kind of pulling the Band-Aid off one, a real political success for Joe Biden. And I don't say that I'm not some Joe Biden stan. I'm just saying, like, I didn't expect this guy to like end this endless war, but he did, right? And the media has to turn that into a loss because it is such an embarrassment to see someone govern. It's very similar to how Trump put up tariffs and everybody like freaked out. And it was like tariffs started moving supply chains. And what they were really angry about is that somebody actually chose to govern. And so we have this problem where when anybody chooses to govern and says, we're going to do things differently, this massive class of whiny, useless fools that are ivy encrusted just let out this kind of giant yawp. And then, people get they are like, oh, is this, is this really the right thing to do? Well, I know we wanted to leave Afghanistan for 20 years. I know it's a 20-year con, but, is it really the right thing to do? I mean, there was embarrassing pictures on TV, and that's where we are. And it's really unbelievably bad for our society.
But Matt, if I could just chime in, and I agree with most of your sentiment. I think it's very, very interesting and important analysis, but I don't think it's fair to chalk up the frustration over how we departed Afghanistan to be purely the media's mishandling it and embarrassed of it. I am someone who has for years been for withdrawing from Afghanistan. There was no path to victory. There was no winning. But we didn't have to leave the way that we did, where 14 Americans were killed by ISIS-K because they were crammed into one location because we didn't plan. We didn't hold other U.S. airfields before we evacuated our people. We left 200 Americans behind enemy lines. We left billions of dollars of equipment to terrorists who are going to use it to kill our allies and potentially American citizens, and completely lost our diplomatic presence in the country that we'd spent 20 years building. Like, I don't want to create this false dichotomy that it was either forever war or leaving the way that we did. And that's just one kind of technical note I would push back on.
Can you what's a better way? Can you come up with an example of like a better loss of a war?
Not historically, but I could tell you how we could have handled this one better.
No, but let's just go practical. Like,
practically, back in May when I was petitioning the White House and members of Congress. Yes, and just real quick, back in May when I was petitioning members of Congress and the White House to start evacuating Afghan civs then, to start evacuating Americans then, they could have started doing it rather than leaving 100,000 behind and leaving 200 American citizens behind just so they get their headline of the war is over. We didn't need an artificial deadline. We all agree we should be out of Afghanistan, but it's not a success when you're leaving people to die who served alongside our country.
Can you name a better end of a war? I mean, let me just say, in 1842, the British had 16,000 troops in Kabul, and then they evacuated. And every single troop and civilian, British, it was 16,000 troops and civilians, every single person but one ended up dying.
It's a useless hypothetical, though. We just had 14 Americans killed that didn't need to die if we had done this right.
I think this is a really key point. There was no better way to do this. The entire diplomatic and military establishment didn't want to do this. The entire media focused on the fact that
How can you say there was no better way to do this when 14 Americans were killed because they were put at a pinpoint of Hamid Karzai Airport?
Or the success. And I think the fact that you have all of these people saying, oh, I wanted to withdraw, but not this withdrawal. I mean, that's just sort of a call for endless war because things are going to go wrong in war. You know this. You worked at DOD. every single time you do something, something goes wrong.
We have the capacity to have done this the right way.
A lot less went wrong on this.
Matt, you pointed to the success.
Any other withdrawal than you can even imagine.
Matt, you pointed to the success of the Transcom evacuation of hundreds of thousands of Afghans. The military has the capacity to do this right if they had the political directive to have done it. They didn't do it, so we left Americans behind.
I mean, ideally, we would have.
Look, you can't point a better withdrawal or a better loss of a war because there isn't any. We got incredibly...
losing wars is not a good thing, correct. A great point, I guess.
But ideally, you evacuate before the fall of the city itself,
but
right?
Forget the fall of the city.
But they start evacuating, 3 months ago, then the Taliban take over quickly. Like, there are trade-offs here. The fact is, this war...
I'm not comfortable with the trade-off of 14 American lives that could have been avoided.
And problems in the withdrawal is simply a way to avoid dealing with the scam of 20 years and trillions of dollars spent over there instead of over here. And that's what this is really about. The withdrawal could have been handled better, maybe. Maybe it could have been handled better. It certainly could have gone a lot worse, okay? But the point of focusing on the withdrawal instead of the fact that we did it, right? Because everything that we try, any big thing you try is going to have things go wrong. The point of defining the withdrawal by the fact that there were logistical problems instead of the fact that it was a successful withdrawal.
14 American lives are not logistical problems.
But the question, how do you evacuate from an airport?
We should
and protect it from a suicide bomber?
We never should have let Bagram fall. We never should have let Kandahar fall. If we had actually secured that, there should have been an evacuation plan before you let the entire country crumble.
How do you protect a 40-mile highway from Kabul to Bagram?
We absolutely have the capacity to do it.
Tell them to do. Like the generals, I'm sorry, but this military, our generals are completely corrupt and they will not evacuate even if you tell them to. It is they basically said to Biden, it's either an embarrassing withdrawal or we stay forever. And we know that. And they've been rolling the president for 20 years. So no, there is no better withdrawal. There is no planning a better withdrawal because the generals just won't obey you. The diplomats just won't obey you. The deep state, the management consultants won't obey you. That's the reality here. You can't plan a better withdrawal when the bureaucracies simply will not do a withdrawal. That's the reality.
And also,
it was going to be this embarrassing because that's what the bureaucrats and the management consultants.
It's not about it being embarrassing. It's immoral. It's un-American. But
if we can't protect a 2-mile road from the embassy to the airport, how are we going to protect a 40-mile road to Bagram?
With prior planning, the will, and actually giving the resources to do it. But we didn't do that. We evacuated and then rushed forces back in. We had 3,000 forces that could have done
now
it.
we have all these resources.
We held Bagram with 2,500 forces.
But what about the road
6 months.
between there? How do you get there?
There are plenty of operational ways to do it.
Without anybody being susceptible to a suicide bomber?
No, not saying that there aren't certainly risks involved in this. I'm not trying to say this was a simple way that it could have been done, but to make it so that we had this one pinpoint for all Americans to go to, for all Afghans to go to, actually putting them more in harm's way and had 14 people tragically die. I will not say that
wouldn't we say the same thing? There's only one highway going from Kabul to Bagram, and we exposed everybody to harm there.
Sorry, just real quick. There's kind of this misnomer that everyone's in Kabul and they all just need to get. I'm talking to Americans who are in Herat, who are 14 hours away from Kabul or from Bagram. This idea that we needed one location, it was the only place you could go through rogue Taliban territory, risk your life, and maybe the U.S. military will help you. I mean, I think it's a shame, but we can all agree, thank God our longest war in history is over.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fair to, just want to say that when it comes to the media and how everybody has responded, I think that the criticism that I know you, Matt, and Ryan have shared on this is, they're focusing on this withdrawal and not on the 20-year war. And I think, look, now, if the media continues in the next week or two to just focus on the withdrawal and not on the 20-year war, then I think you're warranted in that criticism. But obviously, during the time of a disaster, the media is going to focus on the disaster. It's sort of like a hurricane or an earthquake. When it's going on, the media focuses on the disaster. And then in hindsight,
it was a successful withdrawal.
I mean, Alyssa and I feel like it was a bit of a disaster, the evacuation.
And I am told, guys, we do have to wrap, but thank you all. Matt, we really appreciate your insights.
You are the problem, right? This right here is the problem. The withdrawal was successful.
Yes, we need more people writing Substack posts. That's the solution to our problems.
So we don't all agree. That's the issue here.
All right, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. We're just going to have to agree to disagree, everybody, on this one, but that's okay. I can assure you that I myself, for sure, am not a warmonger that wants to continue wars. And I doubt that Alyssa does either. And I don't think any of it. Well, I'm a Tulsi Gabbard stan, so I don't know. But no, I mean, listen, we all have to agree to disagree on this one. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Matt. We have more rising. It'll get better. We're going to be happy. That is coming up next.